Okay, so for today's topic, we will be finally going into the discussion of our individual organ systems as well as the different organs which comprise them. Okay, so for today's topic, we have our musculoskeletal system, and coming from its name, I think we already have an idea of which specific major tissue types comprise your this system. So here you have your musculo. Oh, when we say musculo, of course, I think it pertains to your muscle tissue. Skeletal, maybe your connective tissue, specifically the supportive type, specifically your um, bone. And of course, the cartilage is also included in this system as we will discover later on. Okay, all right. Before we go into the discussing the parts of the musculoskeletal system, first we will need to be experts in identifying the two major types of organs. Later on, when we go to the other organ system throughout the semester, it is very important that you master classifying the different organs of each organ system into these two major types, which basically classify the organs architecturally, or how the different basic tissue types are organized. So the first architectural type would be our parenchymatous type, right? Actually, the parenchymatous type of organ has two major parts: the parenchyma, or the bulk of the organ, the meat, quote unquote, and as well as the stroma. So the parenchyma is the actual functional unit of your parenchymatous organ, so these areas, while the stroma would be the supportive part of your parenchymatous organ. So usually the parenchyma part, guys, it is usually made up of your epithelial tissue, because it is the epithelial tissue that is its favorite thing to do is to become specialized into a specific epithelial cell that has a specific role that would secrete something, metabolize something, okay? And then, of course, these specialized epithelial cells cannot survive on their own. They must be organized into several layers of organization, if you will remember. So it will need a structural component or connective tissue with which they can rest themselves upon, right? And this stroma is not made up of your epithelial tissue. They will need a specific type of tissue whose main purpose in life is to connect other types of tissue. That's why you would have your connective tissue, which composes your stroma. And it doesn't only connect, it also organizes. So, for example, in some organs, it will create lobules, right? It will create cords, plates, etc. And within the stroma, usually it would also contain the duct system, the blood vessel system, and the peripheral nervous tissue component. Okay, so again, that's your parenchymatous type of organ. Okay, and then next is we have our tubular type of organ. So here you can see that the tubular type of organ basically looks like a tube, and it is able to look like a tube because the main important component of that organ, which is actually not technically not part of that organ, is the presence of a space in the middle, which has a technical term of lumen. Diba? So it has a lumen in the center, and then it is made up of layers of tissues forming a wall. So here, our example is our gastrointestinal tract. Okay, so tubular organs, its primary function is to the what? Since it has a lumen, its primary function is to carry contents, produce contents and carry them, or allow the passage of substances from one part of the body to another part of the body, or from one part of the body, it will metabolize it, and then eventually it will bring the unnecessary leftovers outside of the body as well. Okay, so this may be your ingesta, or this may also be your blood in some times, or this can also be your urine. So as long as there is a need to carry substances across the body or even outside the body or into the body, then the classification of that organ is tubular. Again, key point is that it has a space for carrying all those substances. Okay? So, actually, there's a lot of different organ systems that you can master if you already learn or if you become familiar with the architecture of your tubular organ. So the major types of organ systems would be your cardiovascular, because of course it's tube-like because you have to carry the blood. And then the GIT, as we discussed earlier, is of course tubular as well, especially in the intestine. And then also your respiratory system. So as you can see, all three different organ systems are carrying something: blood for the cardiovascular system, food or waste in the GIT, and for the trachea, it is air that needs to be transported from outside the body into the body and outside again. Okay? So as you can see that again, the solid part of your tubular organ system is composed of layers which would have commonalities, but some layers will be removed and some layers can be added. But the most important part in your tubular system is that it is the mucosal layer, which is the one that is very near the lumen or the space or near the substance that the organ is carrying, quote unquote. They will be so specialized to serve the purpose that they need to do. For example, in the respiratory system, the mucosal layer, which is actually composed of your epithelial tissue and a little bit of your connective tissue, which will have a different name. Anyway, we will talk about that more in detail in the respiratory system discussion. We will learn that, oh, the epithelial cells of your mucosal layer of your respiratory system, oh, they're specialized because they need to be able to create mucus, okay? While in the gastrointestinal system, the cells of the epithelial cells, their primary function is to be able to what? Absorb nutrients, diba? While in the uh, uh, blood vessels in the cardiovascular system. Maybe not as much absorption, but able to in some specific types, we will discuss this in the cardiovascular system, they will be able to easily allow the transport of substances from the blood into the organ system. Okay? So please, whenever you study a new organ, try to identify, oh, is this organ tubular or is it parenchymatous? So for the parenchymatous, this will be your organs without any lumen. For example, grossly, or what? The liver, your kidneys, di ba? But, actually, it may be a little bit confusing for you because majority, some parenchymatous organs will actually be in the middle of these two classifications technically. For example, your kidney, di ba? Your kidney grossly, it doesn't have a big lumen such as your intestines or blood vessels. But technically, it is composed by your nephrons, which are technically very, very small labyrinth of combination of clump of very, very small tube-like structures. And in reality, when you use the high magnification, you will be able to see that they will have their mini lumens inside. So depending on the point of view that you will use, maybe we can also say that it's actually a little bit tubular when you view it in a high magnification. But grossly, when you see it, you will not see a major big lumen inside. Okay? So always remember, guys, moving forward, that we would always have, at least in the study of histology or organology, we will be discussing the major types of classifications and the basic structures. But almost always, since the animal body is not binary and its purpose is usually continuous or a spectrum, so there will always be in betweens. Okay, so please remember that and try to uh, appreciate that later when we go to the different organ systems. Okay, all right. So here you can see, let's try to exercise what we have learned in the previous slide. So for the first organ here, we have the liver. As I said earlier, technically it is parenchymatous in nature with your parenchyma and your stromal components over here, right? And then you would also have your lungs, which is technically parenchymatous also. And you would have your epithelial tissues here as well as here. And maybe we can argue upon high magnification, areas of your parenchymatous lungs technically a little bit tubular, right? Because there are multiple very small spaces inside. But usually, the classification is based on the gross architecture. Okay. Now we move on to in this area we have the stomach or intestines. So here you can see, uy, there's a big opening in the middle. So this makes this organ your tubular type. And again, the most important key point in your tubular organs is that its function is usually dictated by the mucosal layer, which its outermost, uh, innermost layer, the epithelial tissue that is near the lumen will dictate its function. Okay, so in this case, it's part of the intestine. And see that the type of epithelium mainly functions for absorption as well as for the secretion of mucosa, which functions to lubricate the contents that passes through it. Okay, and here, oh, so the next time that you are hungry and you want to take a snack, maybe in Raimundo area, in my case, or try to classify the different organs that you are eating. So here, okay, this is your chicken intestine. Uy, tubular type. Uy, I think this is liver ba to? Uy, parenchymatous type. Okay? O this type. O blood. Oh, what about blood? Quite difficult to classify, but blood is actually the content of your cardiovascular system. It is a connective tissue, right? So, I challenge you to try to apply whatever we are learning in our histology and organology class into the things that you're encountering in real life. Okay? Again, these are the two types of your organs and these are their structures, their functions. We have already talked about this earlier. Parenchymatous is usually for metabolism, filtration, production of something. Tubular organs usually for the transport, absorption, and a little bit of secretion also of substances. Examples, liver, kidney, and lungs for your parenchymatous organs and your intestines, blood vessels, and your trachea for the tubular organs. Okay? Finally, we will be talking about today's organ system, which is the musculoskeletal system. Again, coming from its name, we have the muscle tissue and the skeletal, as well as the cartilage, actually, during the development. Okay? So, among the four major types of tissue, we expect that majority of the tissue components in this organ system would be, of course, your muscle tissue as well as your connective tissue. And again, if we will classify it between parenchymatous and tubular, what do you think is the correct classification? Yes, it would be your parenchymatous type because we don't have an opening at the center. Okay? But actually, aside from your muscle and connective tissue, you would also have your nervous tissue that can be found integrated within your connective tissue component of your musculoskeletal tissue. Because we will discuss later that muscle tissue is useless without the control and support of the nervous tissue or nervous system. Okay? All right, so first let's talk about how muscle tissue develops. in the embryo. Okay, so of course, the muscle tissue, its primary germ layer origin would be our pink layer, middle layer, our mesoderm. Okay, and but also in some areas of the body, very specific parts, you would also have ectodermal origin. But for majority, it is your mesoderm. And as what we have discussed in the previous topic, the mesoderm will actually be subclassified or formed into different subparts. You will have your paraaxial mesoderm, which will further develop into your somites, and the somites which will actually subdivide in the different quote unquote ohms, right? The sclerotomes, dermatomes, right? And the myotomes. And you will learn that, oh, those specific quote unquote subparts of your somites, they are dividing because they will eventually give out different adult fates, okay? So here you can see that the lateral plate mesoderm will have different names, and the different layers will form into different types of muscle tissue. For the musculoskeletal topic, we will be focusing in your skeletal muscle type of muscle tissue, because your smooth muscles and cardiac muscles, we will be encountering them more in different organ systems. For the smooth muscle, we will encounter this in your maybe your skin, your special sense organs, and the majority is in the walls of your, yes, your GIT system. While of course, for the cardiac muscle, we will be encountering this in your cardiovascular system. For today's topic, we will be focusing on the story of your skeletal muscle system. Okay? But just as a review, no, so these are your different types of muscle tissue. And for today's topic, we will focus on your skeletal muscle. So for the skeletal muscle, the key point of your skeletal muscle is that it is striated, and it has very big myofibers or muscle cells, and it is multinucleated, and these multiple nuclei are located at the periphery of each muscle cell or muscle fiber. This is in contrast with your smooth and cardiac muscles, which have their nuclei at the central area. Okay? But it is similar, your skeletal muscle is similar with your cardiac muscle, because cardiac muscle can also have multiple nuclei. But in case of skeletal muscle, the multiple nuclei can be as much as 4 to 5, 4 to 6, while in the cardiac muscle, it's usually just 1 to 2. Alright? And like your skeletal muscle, the cardiac muscle also has striations. Anyway, let's focus on the skeletal muscle, at least for today's lecture. So, the skeletal muscle is multinucleated because apparently during its development, each muscle fiber or muscle cell is actually made up of multiple myoblasts and myocytes. And along the course of its development, what happened was they fused into one single cell. Thus, the formation of a single cell with multiple nuclei. Okay? And then these nuclei are delegated or pushed into the sides because the primary function of your muscle cell is to what? To have the ability to contract, right? And of course, to extend. And that ability is afforded by the presence of structures called your myofibrils, collectively called as your myofilaments. And since these muscle cells would have to carry these myofibrils, then the nuclei has no other choice but to be delegated to the sides in order to give way for these important structures. Okay? So, again, let's review what makes muscle tissue special. Of course, as we said earlier, the contractility. And as what we have discussed earlier, each muscle cells contains a lot of these organized myofibrils or myofilaments. So these myofilaments would have different names depending on where they are located and how they look like under close magnification or high magnification. Okay, so you would have your myosin filaments, the thicker one, and the actin filaments, the thinner ones. Okay, and and for the skeletal muscle tissue as well as your cardiac muscle tissue, they are organized in this specific manner so that um, they give off a striated appearance. Okay, there is the formation of your A band and your I band. So A means anisotropic and I means isotropic. Okay, and of course you would have your Z lines where these filaments are actually anchored. Physiologically, during contraction, you would have the sliding of the filaments. Okay, so there is no shortening or lengthening of the filaments, no? Take note that there is only the sliding action which eventually produces the contraction or the relaxation of the whole muscle. Okay, but of course that's for the skeletal muscle tissue. What about the tissue that does not have this organized type of arrangement of the myofibrils, which we will actually encounter more in the GIT system? So there is no striations because in the smooth muscle tissue, the arrangement of the myofibrils is quite more irregular or angular, and instead of your Z lines or Z discs, you would have your dense bodies here. And through the special arrangement of the dense bodies and the myofibrils within your smooth muscle cell, which as you can see, it has a different shape already. It is fusiform in shape instead of a long cylindrical shape. And as you can see, this is how it contracts. That's why organs composed of smooth muscle tissue would have a different way of contracting. The whole organ can either become smaller or contracted and expanded, as opposed to your skeletal muscle tissues or muscle organs, wherein you would have the lengthening or shortening. Okay? Again, all of these contractions is brought about by the excitability of the muscle tissue, wherein, as we said earlier, there is the need for the neuron or nervous tissue component. Again, if this nervous tissue component is removed from your muscle tissue, then the muscle tissue will eventually atrophy, and because it is not able to serve its function. Okay? Of course, if the muscle tissue is able to be contract, of course, it is also able to return to its relaxed state, aka is able to extend itself as well. Okay? Okay, as we said earlier, there are three different types of muscle tissue. You have your skeletal, your cardiac, and smooth. For today's topic, we focus on the skeletal muscle system. Again, it is striated, it has very thick fibers, it has periphery located nuclei, at least in its adult or fully mature um, stage. Okay, the cardiac usually found, not usually, just found in the heart. It is basically like your skeletal muscle, but this time the nuclei is just 1 to 2 per cell, and each cell has this characteristic only in your cardiac muscle type, your branching type of your muscle system. And a key point for your cardiac muscle would be your intercalated discs, which we will learn more about later in the cardiovascular system. They have a special function because unlike your skeletal muscle tissue or skeletal muscle organs, your heart needs to have a very specialized and focused contraction wherein several muscle cells should be able to contract and relax at the same time. Then for the smooth muscle tissue, again, this is non-striated because of the irregular arrangement of the myofibrils or myofilaments. And like your cardiac muscle, it is involuntarily controlled and usually found in the walls of your tubular organs, in the GIT and other areas of the body that needs a sustained contraction phases or sustained relaxation phases. No? So that is the key point for your smooth muscle cells, because for your skeletal and cardiac, skeletal muscle tissue cannot usually keep a very sustained contracted period or relaxed period. Of course, especially the cardiac, because it has to rhythmically uh, change its contracted and relaxed state more frequently, because of course it functions to uh, allow the heart to expel blood, right? The beating of the heart. Okay? Again, these are your three types. And again, the difference between the three types of muscle tissues is that they are severely different based on types. The cardiac muscle is the most conserved with with regards to its size across different organs. But actually, cardiac muscle is just found in the heart. That's why you will not really find very big or very long versions of your cardiac muscle tissue. While for the smooth muscle tissue, wherein you can find it in the walls of your very, very small blood vessels until the walls of your very, very big uterus, which expand during pregnancy, right? So you can see the vast greatness in the variability of the size of your smooth muscle. While for your striated skeletal muscle, we know that this is the biggest possible muscle cell among the three types, because, of course, these muscle cells have to support bigger parts of the body as with your muscle systems that are attached to your bone system. And of course, imagine when you are, for example, eating your food, your steak, your corned beef. Can you imagine one muscle fiber is actually technically one cell, and you can actually uh, see it with your naked eyes, right? So it's very, very big. Okay? So muscle tissue is composed of primarily your cells, as with all other tissues, because you cannot have a tissue without the cells that are its building blocks. Okay? And for the muscle tissue, the muscle cells would have a special term, your myocyte. And in each myocytes, you would have your myofibrils, which we already talked about earlier, your thin myofibrils, your actin, and your thicker ones, your myosin. Collectively, references would call them your myofilaments. And again, they are organized into specific position so that they will be able to slide past one another, so they can afford the contraction function of the muscle. Okay, and because of that, that's why you would have the presence of your striations, because some areas would have your uh, darker areas and your lighter areas. Okay, in the darker areas, you would have the presence of your thicker filaments as well as more overlapping. Okay, then you would also have the connective tissue component, which basically forms the stroma of this tissue. Its purpose is to actually organize these muscle cells into clusters. So you would have your epi, peri, and endomysium, okay, which is basically the epimysium will be the outermost, and actually this connects with the fascia. So some references would say that the epimysium, the connective tissue, which is the most outermost covering of your muscle organs, is continuous with the fascia, or it is the actual fascia as well. And then in each uh, within it would be your muscle fascicles, and each muscle fascicle is covered by your perimysium. And in each muscle fascicle, you have your muscle fibers or your muscle cell, and each muscle fiber or muscle cell is covered by your endomysium, okay, group of muscle cells, and each muscle cell is covered by your um, plasma membrane, and it has a different name if it is a muscle fiber of muscle cells. So a special name is your sarcolemma. Okay? So histologically, usually you will encounter the endomysium here and the perimysium. And the epimysium, usually, guys, it's not included in the slides. But once you see it, you will know it because the epimysium will be composed of a thicker and more layers of collagen fibers. Okay? And again, the skeletal muscle is best appreciated both cross-sectional and horizontal. And you will see that it looks polygonal cross-sectionally, and you will see the individual muscle cells or muscle fibers inside, and the nuclei are outside, peripherally located. And then you would have the presence of your blood vessels and nerves embedded somewhere, usually within your perimysium and epimysium. Okay? And again, this is the development story that we talked about earlier, which explains why the skeletal muscle cells have multiple nuclei in one cell. Okay? Here, the musculoskeletal system is actually composed of your muscle tissue and your connective tissue. So for the bone and the muscle to become integrated and connected, it needs your connective tissue. And in this case, it would be your tendon. So histologically, it looks like this. So here you can see the very distinct muscle part and the tendon part. The muscle part specifically, it is your skeletal muscle. It is striated. It has very thick fibers, and the nuclei are peripherally located. And in this area, you will see that we have your dense white fibrous connective tissue, right? It is not made of muscle tissue anymore. It is made of several layers of which fiber? Collagen fiber. So here is another photo of your tendon and muscle junction. I think we have slides of this in the lab, and hopefully your laboratory instructors will be able to demo these slides to you. Again, what's important is that you are able to recognize the interface, the junction where the muscle connects with your tendon or connective tissue muscle. Okay? So for the connective tissue, this is what we saw earlier, no? The dense white fibrous connective tissue. In some areas of the musculoskeletal system, aside from the dense white fibrous connective tissue, which is usually manifested in the tendons or the connections of your muscle to your bone, so yeah, you will see your collagen fibers and very orderly arrangement of your fibers. We can also see, actually, aside from that, in your ligaments, we would see your elastic type of connective tissue proper. And it is elastic because aside from the abundance of your collagen fibers, there is the addition of your elastic fibers, which we say if we do not use special stains, it will just manifest itself as blank spaces in your histological slides. So you will need to use special stains such as your Verhoff stain in order to stain it purple. Okay? Again, because of this elastic fibers, it will give off grossly a yellowish appearance. That's why your dense white fibrous connective tissue, which do not contain these elastic fibers, which are yellow, it maintains the tendon, it affords the tendon its white gross appearance. While if there is the presence of your elastic fibers, it gives off a more yellowish appearance. So again, for those who are taking gross anatomy, please make sure to view and appreciate this in your gross anatomy laboratory. Okay? So for the supportive connective tissue, earlier we talked about the dense regular connective tissue, which mainly functions to connect the muscle to the bone, right? So it's supportive. Then, sorry, it's connective proper. But for the bone and as well as for the cartilage, they are the supportive type. So again, we have our cartilage and our bone. And usually in the context of the organology, in the adult feet, it is usually the bone that is more pronounced or has more components in the body. And the cartilage will have, mm, actually, there's also a lot of cartilage in the body, but usually the cartilage just serves as the template or placeholder for the bone. Okay? But of course, some areas of the body, even in the adult feet, it will just persist as cartilage depending on the specialized function of the specific organ system. Okay. So for the cartilage, we already know this from Beta 105. So this is more of just a review, and I highly suggest to view the histology lecture video that is in another playlist. But for today, we will also be mentioning it. Okay, so we have our hyaline cartilage, our fibrocartilage, and our elastic cartilage. For the bone, we have our compact and our spongy type of bone. First, let's talk about the cartilage. Okay. So here you can see when we are talking about the musculoskeletal system, your cartilage component goes hand in hand with your bone component, and your cartilage and bone, they are useless if they do not have the muscle component, specifically your skeletal muscle component, because the skeletal muscle serves the purpose of affording the movement and support of your bones. And your skeletal muscle cannot really function if it doesn't have your cartilage or your bone to anchor itself to. Okay? So here you can see in one slide, now we are able to appreciate where they go hand in hand. Actually, here you can see there is also the presence of your connective tissue here, right? Which usually functions as a connector and a covering of your specific organs. Okay? First, let's focus on the cartilage, its development or histogenesis. We have already talked about this in Beta 105. Basically, cartilage comes from your mesenchymal type of your embryonal connective tissue. So these mesenchymal cells, we said they are very stem cell in nature, wherein they have multiple possible endpoints. They can specialize into multiple specific cells depending on their placement in the fetus. Okay, so if they are placed, as we said, if their function in the basic body plan, which we talked about last meeting, is to become cartilage, then these mesenchymal cells will eventually turn into your chondroblasts. Again, if we are talking about the cartilage, the key word, the root word is chondro. If you find the chondro term, it means it has something to do with cartilage. And for its quote unquote last name is blast, it means it is a type of cell that is producing something. So not the mature type, okay? And it becomes cyte, it means it is the mature version of that cell. So these chondroblasts, which came from your mesenchymal cells, will produce your extracellular matrix, and while it is producing this extracellular matrix, it will also be dividing into other chondrocytes. Okay? So, as they are producing matrices, they will also be dividing in order to expand the cartilage organ more. Okay? And during this process, you will have the formation of your isogenous groups of chondrocytes. Okay? Which is most noticeable in the hyaline type of cartilage. So again, we have two types of cartilage development. The one that we already a little bit discussed earlier is your interstitial type, and then the one that needs the presence of your perichondrium or the covering of your whole cartilage organ. You would have your appositional type of development. So again, for the interstitial type, it is the formation of the cartilage from within the cartilage organ, from the central area. And for the appositional type, it is basically the addition of layers at the periphery of the cartilage organ. And key point, the appositional type of um, cartilage formation is only possible if the cartilage has perichondrium. So this is basically a connective tissue layer that is found on the peripheral areas of your cartilages. So, some cartilage types, such as your fibrocartilage, does not have this perichondrium layer, which means it cannot develop or grow via the appositional type. It is usually just the interstitial growth. However, this interstitial type of growing or development of your cartilage is usually mostly seen or mostly occurs during the development or the growth of the fetus or the animal. But once the animal is already in the adult stage, usually, the major type of cartilage growth that happens is just appositional. That's why in areas of the body that there's just the fibrocartilage type, mostly in the joints. If it becomes broken, it is very detrimental to the animal because it's so difficult to repair it. Okay? So here, the perichondrium is here in the peripheral area of the cartilage, and the perichondrium, as you will be discussing more in the laboratory, has an outer fibrous layer, mostly collagen, and inner chondrogenic layer wherein these flat cells, chondrogenic, it means it will eventually form new mature chondrocytes, which will afford the appositional type of growth. Okay, mostly for hyaline and elastic only. Okay, again, these are the three types of your cartilage. We have the hyaline, the fibro, and the elastic cartilage. And each type of cartilage has different functions. That's why they have different appearances under the microscope. The most common type is the most ubiquitous and commonly found type of cartilage within the animal body would be your hyaline cartilage. Hyal means glass because the extracellular matrix or the stuff in between your chondrocytes is glassy. It looks like it's transparent, it's smooth because the collagen fibers found in the hyaline cartilage, which is type 2 in nature, is very fine, and its uh, composition is the same as the extracellular matrix. So it blends. It's as if they are invisible. Okay, and again, the key point for your hyaline cartilage, well, actually, the fibrocartilage can also have this. You would have your isogenous groups. And again, we learned that this isogenous group comes from the division of the chondrocytes. Okay, for the hyaline and fibrocartilage as well as the elastic cartilage, the default type of collagen that is present in all is type 2. Okay, but in fibrocartilage, you have the addition of your, in the elastic cartilage, you have the addition of your type 1. So type 2 cartilage is more, a little bit flexible, but not as flexible as your type 1. So your elastic cartilage needs this type 1 type of collagen because coming from its name, it should have the ability to be elastic or to be bendable because some areas of the body, some structures of the body needs to have this functionality. And aside from the presence of the additional type 1 collagen fibers, you will also be seeing these telltale characteristic fibers, your elastic fibers. Okay, your hyaline and fibrocartilage does not contain large amounts of your elastic fibers. Okay, what else? For your fibrocartilage, since among the three types, it is the most sturdy and it is the most non-stretchable, and it is the one that is located in areas of the body that needs extreme and sturdy support. You would have the presence of your, again, type 2 collagen, but this time the fibers are thicker and coarser and more stronger. That's why the chondrocytes of your fibrocartilage have no choice but be delegated to the peripheries of this thick and coarse type 2 collagen fibers. So that's why when you view it under the microscope, the cells are usually found arranged in rows, diba? So they are arranged in lines. So again, that's the characteristic of your fibrocartilage. And again, it is the fibrocartilage among the three types that do not contain the perichondrium. As such, it has no ability to develop via the appositional type of development. Okay? So, for the elastic type of cartilage, it is usually found where? In the ears. So, if you touch your ears right now, di ba? When you flex your ears, it is very flexible and you can bend it, right? And it will just go back to its previous shape. While for the hyaline cartilage, actually, uh, in your nose, it's not as elastic or bendable. So your nose, the one in your trachea, the end points of the joints, so that is usually hyaline cartilage. Fibrocartilage is delegated to areas of the body which need support, such as your intervertebral discs, or the connection of bones that need to be very sturdy, such as in the pubic synthesis. Okay, symphysis. Now we move on to the bone. So for the development of the bone, if cartilage development is interstitial and appositional for the bone, it is technically endochondral and intramembranous. So the primary form of bone development that occurs within the fetal stage, and during the early parts of bone formation, it is actually endochondral. Okay, wherein, coming from its name, there is a need for the formation of a cartilaginous template. Okay, so first there will be the blueprint of cartilaginous tissue that will form first, so that later, when bone develops, it will know where it should eventually form. Okay, so for example, in the long bones, you would have the formation first of your hyaline cartilage, and then eventually in the middle part and in the outer parts, which is termed as your collar, there would be the eventual death of the chondrocytes there, and the replacement of the chondrocytes with osteoblasts. And then these osteoblasts will eventually form bone tissue, okay, in the central area. At the same time, in the epiphyseal, in the connection of your epiphysis and your diaphysis, you would also have the site of calcification. This is termed as your zone of interstitial growth, wherein from the primary purpose is for the elongation of the long bones. Because earlier in the periosteal collar, the function is to the formation of the sturdy sides, or length, not lengthening, the formation of the actual thickness of the bone. While for the zone of interstitial growth between your epiphysis and diaphysis, it is for the lengthening. Okay? So later we will be talking more about that, but the key point is, from the cartilage, there is the eventual deposition of calcium, which is termed as your ossification, in order to produce your bone tissue. Okay? So intramembranous basically means the formation of bone tissue in between intra membrane, which is basically your periosteum. If you'll remember earlier in the cartilage, the covering of your cartilage is termed as your perichondrium. But when we are already talking about the bone, it changes its name. It becomes periosteum. And again, in between these periosteum membranes, you would have the, from your mesenchymal cells, you would have the formation the conversion of your mesenchymal cells into osteoblasts, wherein they will eventually form your uh, bone matrix that will be deposited with calcium and will eventually harden and turn into your spongy type of bone. So this type of ossification is usually seen in the flat bones of your body. So another view. So again, from mesenchymal connective tissue, embryonal connective tissue, it will give rise to bone tissue. And here you can see that there is no presence of a cartilage template. It's just from mesenchyme to bone. So it's direct. Okay? So usually seen in the flat bones of the body, in the skull, some areas of the clavicle, and such. Okay? For endochondral, again, this is just review of our beta 105, and we talked about this earlier. Again, there is a need for a cartilage template from which bone can eventually add itself on or use it as a template or a placeholder. So here in the epiphysis, this is your site of endochondral ossification, because from chondrocytes, you will have the formation of your bone tissue here. Okay? And hopefully in the laboratory, the different specific zones will be discussed in detail by the group reports. Okay? Of course, you would have your reserve cartilage, the cells, the cartilage cells will have to proliferate and become bigger, and eventually will have to be deposited with calcium, and then eventually you will have the deposition of the osteoblasts, which form the spongy type of uh, bone tissue. Okay, and these different layers of your endochondral ossification clinically is quite important, because as you can see, some areas would have very little matrix, supportive matrix in between the cells, as with the zone of cellular hypertrophy. So if something goes wrong, this area is very, very weak, and in some abnormal cases, or in some, for example, in some dog breeds, this area is quite thick, and thus there is a bigger area of weakness, and usually you will see breakage there. Okay, so some breeds of dogs are prone to this. Okay. And of course, not all bones in the skeletal system is your long bone. Some would be in the form of your vertebra. Okay, so as you can see, it's still the same story. So first, there will be the formation of your mesenchymal cells, and then from the formation of the somites, which is divided into your sclerotome, myotome, and dermatome. For the story of the bone, it's just the sclerotome and the myotome. Sorry, for the musculoskeletal, no? The myotome will eventually turn into your epaxial musculature, while your sclerotome will eventually turn in the actual bone part, your vertebra. Okay? And you can see that in these irregularly shaped bones, you would have your centers of ossification. Okay? Vertebra. For your sternum, you can see the architectural plan, and first it would be your cartilage, and eventually there would be areas wherein the bone will eventually grow and develop in order to solidify the whole structure. And for the joints as well, of course, the commonality is that there is your mesenchyme, which eventually will uh, produce either cartilage first, and then from these cartilage cells there will be the addition of your bone cells. Here you can see this is a synovial type of joint, wherein some areas will turn into bone while some areas will turn into cartilage. Again, it just follows the basic body plan, which was planned so that the primary function of that specific part will be served properly in the adult phase during the adult stage of the animal. Okay? And lastly, we have the lymph bud development. So maybe this is more of a zooming out story. So apparently there are two theories, no? Until now, they're not really sure how the appendages of the vertebrates are formed. The first model is the progress zone model, wherein they say that the primary key players would be the apical ectodermal ridge and the progress zone. So it is through this zone that the appendages or limbs are elongating eventually. While the other model, which is the progress zone model, here it says that um, the several zones of the limb bud development, all of them plays a role in the extension. So from the start, it's just not just the progress zone, it is all the zones that would elongate in order to form the limbs. Okay? And also that in different areas of these lymph buds, there are several growth factors, genetic factors that have to really play in a very systematic play. They should be turned on and turned off at specific precise time because as you will appreciate maybe in your gross anatomy subject, do you realize that the manifestations or the formations of your bones are so complicated, right? Can you appreciate that? It means that there's a very complicated way of forming also. Okay, so these are the genes that play hand to hand in concert in order to say that, oh, in the plantar area of the bone here, this should be the shape. In the dorsal area, this should be the shape. In the caudal area, it should be this specific bone. In the dorsal area, the processes should form in this way and that way. Okay? So again, the basic body plan is a very important component of how the different organ systems develop. Quite especially for the specific different types of bones. Okay? So for the compact bone is found at the edge of your diaphysis. Okay? While for the ends of the epiphysis, you would have your spongy bone. Again, we talked about the flat bone. Your flat bone organ also has your compact on the edge and the spongy bone in the central area. Okay? So for the spongy bone, you would have the trabecular formation, while the compact bone, you would have the osteon or Haversian system. Of course, the spongy bone at the center of your long bones, where later we will learn in the hematopoietic system, this space is important so that it can carry the bone marrow, right? So for the compact bone, it doesn't have to have spaces because it is mostly for the supportive and integrity function of the bone. So it has your different parts. And as we said earlier, unlike your cartilage, which is not supplied by your blood vessels or nervous system, that's why your cartilage it has a difficulty regenerating. Unlike your bone, it can generate because it can still receive nutrients from its uh, vessel supply. And because it needs a vessel supplies, in your compact bone, it needs the containers or spaces for these vessels, hence the formation of your canals and openings within the compact organization. Okay? For the formation of the solid part of the compact bone, you would have the osteon system. So you would have your osteons. That's the building block of your compact bone. These osteons are usually they are circumferential. There is a concentric formation of your compact bone. And then you would also have your interstitial type, wherein that is the in-between of these osteons. These interstitial lamellae, they are irregularly placed because usually they are the product of the uh, remodeled osteons, so that's why they look like that. And of course, you would have your circumferential lamellae, which is the arrangement that encompasses the whole bone organ. Usually, in histological slides, it is very unusual or rare to see their circumferential lamellae, but I think we may have a few actual histological slides in the lab, so make sure that you are able to see compact bone sections that would have this circumferential type. Okay? As for the canal story, in the central area of each osteon, you would have your central canal. And of course, connecting these central canals, you would have your transverse canal. Okay? So, of course, as you will learn in the lab, you would have your other names for it, because in the olden times, usually the first scientists that would describe this, they would name these structures after them. And you would know that because the name would have a capital letter. Okay, so your central canal is also known as your Haversian canal. Your transverse canal is also known as your Volkmann's canal. Okay, and then in actual slides, please be careful because depending on the orientation of the preparation of the slide, it can be, if you are able to see the concentric circles, it means that the compact bone has been prepared cross-sectionally. If you cannot see this circular concentric circles, it means the slide was made longitudinally. Okay, but the key point is that the edges of these osteons is surrounded by your cementum. So make sure that you're able to see these structures under the actual microscope. So here you can see you have your concentric lamellae and the interstitial lamellae in between them. And for the canal system, you have the central canal, Haversian canal, and you have the transverse canal connecting one central canal to another central canal. Other names, Haversian and Volkmann. Okay? So inside this, you would have your blood vessels that is needed because the osteocytes, which are located in these structures known as your lacuna, so your chondrocytes as well as in your cartilage, they are also contained in your lacuna. They would have this special container spaces because the matrix is very hard, right, for both your cartilage and your bone. In your bone, it is, the key point is that it is calcified. Okay, and here you can see that you have tiny cracks emanating from each lacuna which contains your osteocytes. That is better appreciated in some preparations. These are your canaliculi. Culi means small canal. This is because your osteocytes have cellular processes, and this canaliculi allows for your osteocytes to connect with another osteocytes. Okay, so they are able to diffuse nutrients coming from the blood vessels in the central canal into the other osteocytes. Okay, so again, in terms of bone, there are several preparations by which we can prepare bone tissue. So for bone, there are two types. First is the ground bone, wherein in order to make the bone thin so that it can be placed in a slide for microscopic examination, it is grounded, no? So it is physically ground into very thin sheets. Okay, so there is no removal of calcium. But for other preparations in which there are other tissues that is seen, the earlier tissues that we saw wherein there's muscle tissue, we have no other choice but to fix the sample and decalcify using acidic substances or acidic medium in order to make the bone more pliable so that the microtome or a blade can be used to cut it into thin sections. If you are able to see other tissues such as your muscle tissue or your connective tissue together with bone, then most likely that bone preparation has been prepared through decalcification. Otherwise, if it has been prepared through grinding, then you will not be able to see other tissues because during grinding, the hardness of the bone must be kept intact. And histological preparations through grinding is usually done because it is here where we are able to appreciate the smaller, finer details of the bone, compact bone, which is your canaliculi and other stuff. Okay, and as you can see, the blood vessels within your central canals is not as preserved as those that were decalcified or subjected to acidic medium. Okay, of course, before subjecting to acidic substances, you have to fix it with formalin first. Okay. Again, for the spongy bone, the key point is there are bone trabeculites and there's no osteons, okay? And for the spongy bone, the different types of bone cells are best appreciated. Of course, this is just a review. You would have the osteoblasts or the bone-forming cells, immature cells at the periphery of your bone trabecula, and if they become mature enough, they will move into the central areas as your resting cells, old, mature osteocytes. There are not osteoblasts anymore. And another very cute cell type would be the presence of your osteoclasts. These are usually big, multinucleated. Technically, they are the macrophages of your bone tissue, and they are playing a big role in the reformation and remodeling of your spongy bone. And I think we have excellent slides in the laboratory. I think the embryo snout slide, we have a digitized slide of that. It has a lot of very cool looking osteoclasts, so please make sure that you view those slides and either digitally or in the actual laboratory sessions. So these osteoclasts, whenever there is a need to reform or remodel, they will quote unquote eat your bone matrix, and during this action, it is able to produce a special type of lacuna or container termed as your house shapes lacuna. So that is this part. It is like the bite part. Okay, so here you can see. Okay, so it is for the remodeling or reorganization. Okay, so we also have a very nice slide, a longitudinal section through a developing finger. So I think this is a human finger. So anyway, we are humans are animals as well. And here, everything that we have talked about is best appreciated, right? Um, Here you can see the presence of your synovial joints, which is a very important structure of your muscular system. If we focus here, you will see that there is like an in the synovial joint, there is a synovial membrane, and it looks like what? It's lining something from a lumen. So it looks like an epithelial tissue, right? But because the cells here do not have your basement membrane, so it's termed as epithelial-like or epithelioid. So the function of this synovial membrane is to actually produce the fluid which lubricates the joint. Okay, so the synovial fluid. Okay, if we focus in these areas here, which is the forming immature muscle tissue, what type? Skeletal muscle tissue, you can see the initial forming of your striations. And the telltale sign of a developing skeletal muscle is that its nuclei still has not traveled to the peripheral areas. It is still in the middle areas. It is still developing, so you can still find, it is normal to find in the developing skeletal muscle tissue nuclei which are centrally placed. So this is especially important when you become histopathologist in the future, when you are looking in the regeneration story of skeletal muscle. So you can see, it is possible to see centrally located nucleus of skeletal muscle. It means that skeletal muscle is still in the process of maturing. Okay? What else? If we focus again in this area, again, what do you call this area? This is your epiphysis. And here you are looking at cartilage, if you see here. And here you are already looking at the initial stages of bone, specifically your spongy bone. And again, this area basically shows bone formation, specifically your endochondral ossification, wherein again you are able to see the different types of cells in their journey from uh, chondrocytes or cartilage cells until they eventually die and become replaced with bone tissue. Okay, so again, in organology, the goal is to be able to identify the different parts of the skeletal, or in this case of the skeletal system, and how different tissue components work hand in hand in order to properly give and serve their function in the body. Okay, what else? Here is a closer look of the spongy bone, and again you will see the osteoblasts, the osteocytes, and I'm not sure if we're able to see osteoclasts, maybe no osteoclasts in this view. And here you can see that this type of formation here in this area, because it is in the peripheral area, from mesenchymal cells, there are no cartilage template. So this would be your uh, a little bit your intramembranous type. So again, from the membrane, from the periosteum, there will be your mesenchymal cells here that will turn into your osteoblasts. Okay? So again, we have this actual slide in the laboratory. So I hope the reporting groups will be able to use this slide when discussing the musculoskeletal system. And finally, this is a very good diagram which is found in your reference books, and it basically reminds us of which specific germ layers give rise to which specific parts of your muscular and skeletal system. Okay? Do not forget to sign the attendance form at least for this uh, current semester, first semester, school year 2026-2027. So if you're someone from the future, please make sure that you will not be using this attendance QR code. Use the attendance QR code of the current semester. Okay? And yes, we have an online quiz later at 9 p.m. So please make sure to turn on the notifications for the Google Classroom. So thank you, and that's all for today's lesson.